They told me my season might be over, but God told me this is just the beginning. I give him all the glory.
Just days after Luka Dončić went down on April 2nd, something surfaced that made the whole situation feel a lot more complicated, and it raises a question the league probably doesn't want people asking. What if that injury wasn't just bad luck? What if there's more to it? Today we're unpacking all of it. What led up to that moment, the subtle but telling remarks Kyrie Irving made afterward, and why some people around the league are starting to look at this situation differently. Because yeah, you heard about the injury, but what happened behind the curtain is where things start to get uncomfortable. The Lakers were facing OKC, and by halftime, something was clearly off. Luka walked through the tunnel, and he wasn't moving right. Not speculation. People close to the team saw it firsthand. He was limping noticeably. Anyone paying attention could tell. So naturally, the question becomes, what did the medical staff do with that information? They cleared him, sent him right back out to start the third quarter like nothing was wrong. And before brushing that off as a routine decision, take a second and think about who's actually making that call, because this is where things start to unravel. According to insiders, the group responsible for that decision has operated for years within an environment heavily influenced by Clutch Sports and LeBron James. And if you understand how that ecosystem works in Los Angeles, then you already know this isn't exactly a neutral setting. These aren't outside independent voices. This is a structure where LeBron has held significant power for a long time. So ask yourself, what's the justification? Why send an MVP caliber player who is visibly compromised back onto the floor in a regular season game? What possible gain outweighs that level of risk? There are only a couple of ways to look at it. Either it was an unbelievable failure in judgment from a medical standpoint, or there was a willingness to see what would happen if Luka pushed through it. Because if Luka Dončić goes down with a serious hamstring injury, everything changes. He's no longer leading the league in scoring. He's no longer sitting at the top of the MVP race. And suddenly, the dynamic inside that team shifts in a major way. 4 minutes and 12 seconds. That's all it took. Luka checks back in, plants on his left leg, and it gives. Hamstring gone. Season effectively over. One of the most dominant scoring runs we've seen in years. Erased in just over 4 minutes after he was cleared to return. And here's the part that makes it even harder to ignore. This wasn't Luka insisting on going back in. This is a player who's been competing at a professional level since his early teens. He's built to play through pain, so when the medical team tells him he's good, he's going to trust that. That's the entire purpose of having that staff in place. And in this case, that trust didn't hold up. Now, maybe you're thinking this is all just an unfortunate chain of events, that sometimes injuries happen and there's nothing deeper behind it. Fair enough. But then you have to explain Kyrie Irving, because Kyrie didn't just post a generic message and move on. He said something pointed, something that directly referenced the people Luka has around him in LA. And coming from someone who's seen that inner circle up close, that carries weight. We'll get to that. But first, you need to hear what Luka himself said after the injury, because when he finally spoke, it sent shockwaves across the entire NBA. They told me my season could be finished, but God told me this is just the start. All glory to him. That was the entire message. No polished PR response, no carefully crafted update about rehab timelines or taking things day by day, no scripted optimism about trusting the process or leaning on the medical team. Just Luka Dončić looking straight into the camera, speaking from a real place. And that matters more than people realize, because think about how rare that kind of moment actually is. Picture almost any other superstar in that situation, LeBron James, for example. And you already know the script. It's always the same language. Focus on recovery, stay patient, come back stronger. It's predictable, but Luka didn't follow that pattern. He went somewhere else with it. He openly talked about his faith right there, unfiltered in today's NBA. And if you think that doesn't carry weight right now, then you probably haven't been paying attention, because just 2 days before Luka went down, March 30th, 2026, the Chicago Bulls waived Jaden Ivey. And that situation, it connects more than you'd expect. Ivey wasn't just any player. He was a former top 5 pick, averaging close to 18 a night in his second year, and someone Chicago had just brought in as a key piece moving forward. Then something changed. He found religion, and he didn't keep it quiet. He went public with it. Long Instagram lives, sometimes over an hour, where he talked about faith, about Jesus, about his beliefs. And then one morning he took it a step further. During a live stream, he directly criticized the NBA's promotion of Pride Month, calling it something he didn't agree with on a moral level. By that same evening, he was gone. No drawn out process, no long internal discussions. Reports say the team had already reached out to the league office that morning, figuring out how to move on, and by late afternoon, it was done. Officially, it was labeled conduct detrimental to the team, but Ivy told a completely different story. He went live again after being waived and explained his side, said he was doing everything right, rehabbing, following instructions, staying locked in. According to him, the only thing that changed was that he started speaking openly about his faith, and then he said something that's hard to ignore. He claimed the reason people around the league, even those he thought were close to him, distanced themselves was because of that, because he was talking about God. Now fast forward just a few days. Luka Dončić, arguably the biggest international star in the game, leading the league in scoring, delivers a public message that carries a very similar tone. And here's where it gets interesting. Go check the NBA's official social media accounts. Scroll through Twitter, Instagram, wherever you want. Try to find Luka's statement. You won't. No repost, no highlight, nothing. Instead, those same platforms were busy pushing LeBron's latest sneaker release. That's not random, that's a decision. Somewhere along the line, someone chose what gets amplified and what doesn't. And Luka giving credit to God after a potentially season-ending injury didn't make the cut, but a shoe drop did. That contrast says a lot. Because the league doesn't mind spirituality when it's vague, when it's safe, when it doesn't challenge anything. That kind of quiet, non-specific messaging is easy to market, but when a player is direct, when they say something with conviction, something that might not line up neatly with sponsors or broader branding, that's where things get uncomfortable. We just saw how quickly things moved with Ivy, and now with Luka, he makes that statement, suffers the injury, and suddenly the momentum around his MVP case fades. He doesn't even land on an all-NBA team. Maybe that's coincidence. Or maybe it's part of a pattern people are only starting to notice. And I'm supposed to accept that all of this is just coincidence. That there's nothing coordinated going on here when it comes to players openly expressing their faith. That's a tough sell. But here's the part nobody saw coming. A few days after tearing his hamstring, Luka Dončić left the country. And the reason behind that decision should make people inside the Lakers organization very uneasy. Because this wasn't some mystery treatment or experimental gamble. What Luka went overseas for is actually well known in elite sports circles. A mix of stem cell therapy, platelet-rich plasma, PRP, and orthokine. If that sounds familiar, it should. Kobe Bryant famously traveled to Germany multiple times late in his career for that exact same approach, crediting it with helping him stay competitive when his body was breaking down. Here's the detail that often gets overlooked. These treatments do exist in the United States, but they're tightly restricted. FDA guidelines limit how far doctors can go, especially when it comes to stem cell manipulation.
Overseas clinics don't have those same limitations, which allows them to operate at a different level of intensity. Dr. Evan Jeffries, a licensed physical therapist who's been publicly analyzing Luka's situation, even mentioned that, at least in theory, this kind of treatment could cut recovery time significantly. We're talking about potentially going from a 4 to 6 week timeline down to something closer to 2 to 3. But let's be honest about what this really signals. Luka didn't just leave for better treatment. He left because he doesn't trust the medical staff he had access to. Think about that for a second. This is the face of the franchise, the player they committed $165 million to on a 3-year extension not long ago. And yet, after what happened in that OKC game, he made the call to fly across the world and rely on his own team instead of the one provided by the organization. That's not a small statement, and it's not without risk either. This marks the 5th hamstring issue of his career. Those injuries are notoriously tricky. They're unpredictable, and more importantly, they play a huge role in stabilizing the knee. If that muscle isn't fully recovered and something goes wrong on a landing, you're no longer talking about a minor setback. You're potentially looking at something far more serious. We've already seen how this can play out. Peyton Watson dealt with a similar grade 2 strain this season. He missed over a month, came back, and within just a few games, he was sidelined again. That's the line Luka is walking right now. If he comes back too soon and aggravates it, the long-term impact could be significant. So what he's doing is essentially taking control of his own recovery timeline instead of following the organization's. He said his season wasn't over, that this was just the beginning, and then he backed that up with action. But this situation doesn't stop at medical decisions. It goes deeper. Because right now, the NBA has a Luka Dončić situation on its hands, and it doesn't look like they're trying to fix it. It looks like they're trying to sidestep it. While most people are focused on his statement or the injury itself, something else has been happening quietly in the background. Before he got hurt, Luka was putting together a season that didn't even look real. Over 33 points per game, leading the league, doing it with a usage rate so high, it made peak James Harden's workload look modest. He was a lock for first-team All-NBA, right there in the MVP race with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Nikola Jokic. And now, he's suddenly dropped in the conversation, slid behind SGA, Jokic, and even Victor Wembanyama in some discussions. Why? One game. That's all it comes down to. He's played 64 games. The cutoff is 65, and this is where things take a turn. Those missing games trace back to early December, back-to-back absences on the 4th and 5th. Not for rest, not for load management. Luka was in Slovenia. His daughter was being born. He stepped away to be there for his family, and now that decision could cost him everything from awards recognition to serious money. His agent, Bill Duffy, is reportedly pushing for an exception under extraordinary circumstances. The argument is straightforward. If the 65-game rule exists to prevent healthy players from sitting out unnecessarily, how does it apply to something like this? And he's not alone in that thinking. Veterans like Dirk Nowitzki and Tracy McGrady have also weighed in, questioning how rigid the rule should really be. But according to reports, Adam Silver isn't backing off. Because if Luka gets an exception, it opens the door for others. Anthony Edwards, Cade Cunningham, who are also hovering around that same threshold. So now this isn't just about fairness. It's about precedent and money. Because if Luka doesn't make an All-NBA team, he becomes ineligible for a Supermax extension. That's not a small penalty. We're talking about a difference of roughly $70 million. So by strictly enforcing the rule, the league isn't just maintaining structure, it's potentially redirecting tens of millions of dollars away from one of its biggest stars. That's the reality. The league can point to the rule book all it wants, but it can't control how players respond. And that's where Kyrie Irving comes back into the picture. Remember, Kyrie has seen how all of this works from the inside. He understands the dynamics, the power structures, the unspoken rules. And recently, he finally said something about what's going on with Luka behind closed doors in Los Angeles. The way he phrased it, let's just say it raised a lot of eyebrows. And it lines up a little too well with everything we've been talking about. A few days after Luka spoke, Kyrie broke his silence. And what he said next is something you need to hear carefully. Kyrie said, "I'm glad Luka is giving glory to God during times like this, especially considering what's around him." That last part, what's around him, that's the piece people shouldn't ignore. Because Kyrie isn't guessing here. He's lived it. He spent years alongside LeBron in Cleveland. He understands how that ecosystem functions behind the scenes and what happens when a young superstar gets pulled into that orbit in Los Angeles. This isn't just about basketball. In LA, the league, the business side, and the entertainment world are all tangled together. It's an environment where influence runs deep, and not always in ways that are visible on the surface. So when Kyrie looks at Luka, a player who's openly leaning into his faith and trying to stay grounded, and then makes a comment like that, it's not random. It's a warning. He's seen what that environment can do. He's seen how quickly priorities shift when branding, power, and control enter the equation. And now, from his perspective, he's watching someone else step into that same situation. But here's where things take an even sharper turn. While Kyrie is talking about what's happening off the court, the on-court product is starting to reflect something too. Because if you think all of this is just speculation, go look at what happened the moment Luka was out of the picture. April 5th, Lakers versus Mavericks. First game without Luka Dončić. And what unfolded didn't look like a team adjusting. It looked like a shift in control. LeBron James took over completely. His usage rate jumped to 35.5%, his highest in over 3 seasons. He finished with 30 points and 15 assists, dominating the ball from start to finish. At 41 years old, playing nearly 40 minutes, controlling every possession. And the energy? It didn't look like survival. It looked like comfort, like the system had snapped back into something familiar. If you've been following closely, this isn't new. It's a pattern, and it's becoming more obvious. Because the question is simple. Why would a player who constantly talks about managing his workload suddenly lean into that kind of heavy ball-dominant role right when his co-star is sidelined? One explanation is legacy.
LeBron has spent years being measured against Michael Jordan, and the one narrative that still carries weight is the idea of carrying a team deep into the postseason on his own. That lone leader storyline still matters, and moments like this create the opportunity to build it, whether intentional or not. But while that's happening, look at what's going on around him. Take DeAndre Ayton, for example. When the Lakers brought him in, there was a lot of talk about defense, interior presence, anchoring the paint. But in that Dallas game, 9 shot attempts. 9. Since Luka went down, his scoring has dipped to just over 12 points per game, and it's not hard to see why. His role isn't expanding, it's shrinking. Whether by design or circumstance, the system isn't running through him. It's orbiting around one player. And if things don't work out, it's not hard to predict where the blame will land. Narratives form quickly. A max contract big man underperforming is an easy target, while a 41-year-old putting up big numbers gets framed as defying time. That's how the story writes itself. But here's the thing, the people who helped build this league are starting to push back. On April 7th, Magic Johnson spoke out. He said he was crushed by Luka's injury, but he didn't stop there. He made it clear that Luka was having an MVP level season and deserved first-team All-NBA recognition. That's significant. When someone that closely tied to the Lakers publicly backs a player in that way, it says a lot about how this situation is being viewed internally, and he's not alone. There's been a wave of veteran voices stepping in, something we don't see often. Carmelo Anthony called out the 65-game rule, saying it makes no sense to penalize someone for being present at the birth of their child. Tracy McGrady echoed that, pointing out the obvious. An in-game injury isn't load management, and treating it like it is misses the entire point. Even Dirk Nowitzki, who rarely jumps into league debates, said the rule needs serious reconsideration. His concern, that players might feel pressured to rush back and risk big injuries just to meet an arbitrary threshold. And then there was Jalen Williams, the player guarding Luka when the injury happened. After the game, he didn't sound like a competitor talking about an opponent. He sounded shaken. He admitted it was unsettling to witness in real time, especially given his own history with similar injuries. Think about that. Opponents are showing empathy, legends are speaking out, and yet the decisions that matter most don't seem to be changing. So where does that leave everything? Luka is overseas, trusting specialists outside the organization to guide his recovery. The league is holding firm to a rule that could cost him both recognition and tens of millions of dollars. And back in LA, the system keeps moving. Heavy minutes, high usage, familiar patterns. From the outside, it looks like the league is trying to move past him to shift the spotlight elsewhere. But there's one variable they can't control: Luka himself. Because he already said how he sees this. He believes this isn't the end of his season, and if he finds a way to come back and perform at a high level after everything that's happened, that won't just be a return, it'll change the entire conversation. So now it comes down to this: is the 65-game rule actually fair, or is it too rigid for situations like this? And what did Kyrie really mean when he talked about what's around Luka in Los Angeles? Curious to hear your take.